Throughout 2023, I've been very lucky to try out some cool devices that have come to market. From conventional slab-style smartphones to interesting first-generation foldables from companies like OnePlus, I've spent enough time with these devices to really pick apart what I like and what I don't like about 2023's most hyped phone releases. And today, I want to tell you my top 3 picks. For a phone that makes its way into this list, it has to be a device that I wouldn't mind daily driving. And there can only be a singular device from one company, so I can't choose, say, an S23 Ultra and a Z Fold 5 because those are both Samsung devices. And they also have to be practical to me and bring me some sort of utility in my life. So before we start, let me be clear that this is my top 3. These are my personal picks, and you might agree with some of them, you might not at all, and that's totally fine. I'm not here to make a shopping list and recommend you devices that you should go out and purchase right now. I just want to tell you my favorites after I've spent some time with them. Before we start though, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. We're pushing very close to 30,000 subscribers, and it would mean a lot if we can get there by the end of the year. I don't think it's possible, but if you want to test it, let's see what we can do. Anyway, starting at number 3, it's actually a newcomer, and it's a phone that I was heavily considering switching to, minus a couple of caveats that somewhat ruined the experience for me, but we'll get to that. Anyways, number 3 on my list is the OnePlus Open. Here in North America, you don't really have many choices for foldables, and in Canada, aside from the OnePlus Open, the only other option is the Galaxy Z Fold 5. And while I did love the Fold 5, the Open introduced a lot more to the plate and makes Samsung's look a little underdeveloped. The OnePlus Open has almost no crease, an aspect ratio of 20:9 on the cover display, making both the unfolded inner display and the outer screen not only easy to interact with, but it keeps them familiar and comfortable. There's a stunning 2800 nit display on both panels. Both screens are rocking a refresh rate of 120 Hz, and the Open's fit and finish makes it feel a step ahead of Samsung, despite it technically being a first generation foldable from OnePlus. And yes, I know that this is technically a third generation device, as it is basically the Oppo Find N3, but we didn't get to experience that over here in North America. So I'm going to call this a first generation foldable from OnePlus. So coming out of the gate with a device that feels really well built with top of the line specs is really important. And when it comes to the specs, the OnePlus Open really curb stomped the competition. It does retain the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 like the Fold 5, but there is only one model of the OnePlus Open, which is slightly cheaper, and it has 512 gigs of UFS 4.0 storage and 16 gigs of RAM. Not only does this allow for things like Open Canvas, which is a really new and unique way to do multitasking on a foldable, and in my opinion, makes a whole lot of sense, but it's not like they skimped anywhere else to bring this to you. This is the first phone that I've unboxed in 2023 that included a charging brick. It's also the only phone that I've unboxed since I started making content that included a case. And they're not just crappy thrown in accessories either. The case feels really premium, and it actually color matches the device that you choose. And the charger included is a 67-watt brick capable of fast charging the phone to its absolute limit. From the gaming performance to the cameras, it surprised me in almost every single way. However, the Open didn't make it to my number 1 spot for a couple of reasons. When I unboxed the Open, it had a really nice snap into the hinge, and after a couple of weeks of using that device, that snap almost completely went away, which makes me really concerned about the durability of this device long term. The battery life on my unit also didn't necessarily fare the best. I found that I was getting about 4 to 5 hours of screen on time before it completely died. And while it did have fast charging, and it is something that I could put up with, honestly, I think that 5 hours is just shameful. And lastly, the software just kind of felt sort of unfinished. Like, if I were to force close apps, they wouldn't close. No matter how many times I did it, it was just a bug that kept happening, and it got really frustrating. Not only that, but I've had apps just completely close out on me entirely when I was in the middle of using them. Things like this just didn't really give me the most hope for this device. Now, I will say that I know some people who've had a fantastic experience with the Open, and I would be tempted to trying it out again and do another long-term review if that is something that you'd like to see. But I also know some people who've had some, let's call it issues, like my buddy Dave, whose display just stopped working. Now, the next phone on my list is one that I really did consider putting in my number 1 spot for a majority of reasons. It's just a phone that really caught me by surprise this year, and it's one that I really do enjoy. Whether I was taking it on a trip to take some stunning images or just enjoying the out-of-box clean experience it gave me, the Pixel 8 Pro blew me away. I tried the Pixel 7 Pro last year and pretty much openly told you all not to buy it. I just had several issues, from a terrible modem to overheating problems, and truthfully, I just felt that the phone was built with super cheap materials that didn't hold up to devices in its price point. But this year, the Pixel 8 Pro couldn't really be any further from the truth. Getting rid of that rounded glass, adding the 120Hz Super Actual display with a 2400 nit peak brightness, and evening the bezels gave this phone an immediate pleasing first impression. It finally felt flagship. It felt like Google had put a lot of thought and care into this phone and put it on the same pedestal as something like the S23 Ultra or the iPhone. And with the glass on the rear now being made out of a nice matte material, smoothing out the edges to give the phone a more pebble-like design, and the light weight of the Pixel 8 Pro, it really made it feel a lot smaller despite its large 6.7-inch display. It's truly one of the most comfortable, one-handed, large format slab style devices, and I love carrying this thing around with me. Using the stock Android experience the Pixel 8 Pro gave me made me fall in love with Android all over again. I appreciated the clean and very focused interface. I loved all of the AI features like call screening and having the ability to change the sky in my photos to make them look like they were taken at a different time of day. And overall, I really liked how fluid and snappy the Pixel 8 Pro was to use. There's just something about the out-of-box colors on this phone that make the images extremely shareable, and its 5x 50 megapixel telephoto camera is genuinely one of the best on the market. The Pixel 8 Pro held up so well in night shots, even versus my 15 Pro Max, that it was my go-to for a while. I also liked how flexible the raw images were. Utilizing that full 50 megapixel sensor just allowed for some pretty creative edits while in Lightroom that really made the subject of my photos pop. And the video did finally get a step up, putting it very close to something like the iPhone for me, which was really surprising. All in all, I just wasn't expecting this from Google. Where the Pixel kind of folded for me a little though was in the performance. There were just some tasks that got a little hung up for me, like Lightroom exports, and a few games I've ran into that were heavily unoptimized for Tensor at the time of using it. But with the 7 years of promised software updates and the amount of love that Google seemingly put into the Pixel 8 Pro this year, I really think it's just going to continue to get better. All right, we've made it to the #1 spot, but before I tell you about my #1 choice, I want to give you a rundown of some devices that I think are kind of deserving of at least a mention in this video. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 was a phone that I daily drove for quite a while. It got me to really love the foldable form factor, and I appreciate what these devices are capable of. It was fast, had amazing displays, but for me, left me wanting just a little bit more for the price point, considering that it wasn't necessarily too different from last year's Fold 4. And the base model iPhone 15, this is the first time that I felt like Apple's really given this lineup an upgrade since the iPhone 10. Dynamic Island was added, that glossy cheap feeling glass was removed, USB-C, a better main camera, and last year's Pro chip really did wonders for this phone at its price point. I just wish that we had at least gotten a 90Hz refresh rate display, but the average consumer apparently doesn't care. And my last honorable mention goes out to the S23 Ultra. I love the S23 Ultra, but I don't feel like, for me, that it was any more exciting than the OnePlus Open, or a big enough improvement over the S22 Ultra to really warrant a space over the Pixel 8 Pro. Its cameras are solid, and it has the best zoom in the game, but its video can be improved, and the shape of the phone, while I had gotten used to it, is just a bit cumbersome. And while it did bring the 8 Gen 2 and things like UFS 4.0 to the market first here in Canada, I think that there's phones that just do it a little bit better. However, the S22 and S23 Ultra are both phones that got me to open up to Android, and they will always have a special place in my heart. And with that said, this might piss you off, but my #1 phone of the year is actually this, the iPhone 15 Pro Max. This one came out of left field for me. Originally, I only bought it to cover for the channel, but after spending more and more time with this phone, I couldn't give it up. The battery life for me is just incredible, and I'm easily able to stretch it for 2 days on a charge with about 4 to 5 hours of light use each day, and mostly because that standby time is just incredible. It's also much lighter than its predecessor, which really makes a difference in everyday use, and the inclusion of USB-C Plus, the fact that I switched to Mac as my main machine has been very beneficial to my workflow. The optimization iOS has over Android when it comes to social media apps is also just a major reason as to why this device has ended up in my pocket. Making things like YouTube Shorts or TikToks with the full output of the iPhone sensor is really important to me, and not losing out on features like YouTube community posts on certain phones is a must. It has fantastic cameras, about on par with something like the Pixel 8 Pro in certain situations, but I wouldn't call it better. But that 5x sensor allows for so much light and detail in dark areas that it puts the 10x periscope zoom on the S23 Ultra to shame in many conditions. And the video capabilities of the iPhone 15 Pro Max are just unmatched in the smartphone industry, allowing you to record log video externally to an SSD using the ProRes codec. This might not be the most fun phone to use, and there are definitely some things that I miss on Android since carrying this as my daily driver. But simply put, this is just the best phone for my workflow, and it's been more so of a tool to me. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked my list, like the video down below. If you hated it, like the video down below. Leave a comment telling me what your best picks were for this year, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.